Yay, okay, we're running. Sorry about the delay. We can don't thank Bill Gates for that. That's big enough, right? I'll deal with the size later. You can still see that on camera. It'll be impetus. We do not sit so far in the back. Jude. We have a reading for Tuesday that talks about women in public in 19th century France. And so I think at that point, sort of bring us back to some of the Caillebotte pictures that we didn't look at that point, because they make sense to fit into that. Since some of Mary Cassatt's pictures deal with similar themes. And so that'll come together, I think, at that point, even though the reading focuses on some pictures by Berthe Morisot. But that brings us into a section where we get to talk about two of the women artists who are tightly associated members of the Impressionist group. And it's worthwhile noting that the Impressionists as a group were, as we've read, sort of interested in being avant-garde, right? They're interested in putting themselves forth as a movement that is breaking with traditions in various ways, right? And in one of those ways is indeed their very progressive view of equality of the sexes, right? And we've read some things that are about gender differences and how these things linger, but as an artistic group, they felt that women should have as strong a role as men do, as anybody does. Everybody should have the same opportunity. And this was not an idea that was shared with the academy in France, the institutions that existed, the ones they're rebelling against. So that's rather new. So the fact that we've got two very prominent women artists as part of the Impressionists is in fact indicative of the Impressionist agenda. So Mary Cassatt is we've seen her as a subject in the Degas pictures, but we'll look at the paintings by her today, is an American, an expatriate American from Philadelphia, and lived the majority of her adult life in Paris. She originally came from Philadelphia. Her father was a wealthy stockbroker that gave the family the means to have her live abroad. Nice, huh? If my family could send me to Paris for my adult life. But the family also had French roots. Cassatt family had French roots. The Cassatt family was once called Cassat, and they had emigrated from France back in the 17th century, back really early on, like 1670s. The Cassatt family could trace its roots back in America, having emigrated from France. So her going to France was going sort of to the family homeland, if you will. And the family as a group had enough money that in the 1850s, when she was like 7 years old, the entire family decided we're going to go on a trip to France. 5 years, right? A little 5-year trip to France. So she spent sort of her, what do you call that, her formative years, 7 to 11 or 12, right? She's living in Europe with her family traveling about, right? And at that point, it really seems to have changed her. She decided at that point, most think that she decided that this is one of the seedless plans about maybe becoming an artist, because her family's making the grand tour, they're going to all the big museums and so forth and so on. So she's back in the States after this, and she's 16 years old, 1860. She's 16 years old. She informs her family that she wants to be a professional artist, which is really extraordinary for women in the 19th century, just because the cards were stacked, the deck was stacked against them, right? So she went to the premier academy for art at that time, which was the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, which still exists, PAFA, in downtown Philadelphia, PAFA. Thomas Eakins taught there, the famous American artist, right? And it was really the hotbed, although he hadn't started teaching there yet, so she didn't study there very much. So she studies at PAFA to develop herself into becoming an artist. But she finds that the American system is really, really sort of closes most of its doors to women artists. And if you want to learn more about this, there's a wonderful, fairly quick read by Linda Nochlin, our old friend Linda Nochlin, who we've read other articles by, called Why Are There No Great Women Artists? And the answer is because the men closed the doors on them. Didn't let them in. They couldn't study the nude. Right? They couldn't study from the model. So there's no opportunities. And so she went to France, hoping to find better opportunities. Right? Finally settles in Paris, 1874. A good year to settle in Paris, right? Because 1874 is the year of the first Impressionist show. Right? And as she moves to Paris, so she settles down in 1874. And by the way, she's like 30 years old at this point. Right? She meets Degas. And they become immediate and quick friends. Lifelong friends. We now know from an exhibition that was at the National Gallery a few years back that he often would work with her on some of her compositions when she was having troubles with them. So he'd try this in the back to see if this works a bit better. Right? Now, sometimes that happens in other situations where it seems as if the man is mansplaining it, you know, going and saying, let's do it this way. But I think the Degas-Tissot relationship was much more friendly. I think. Okay. It's Degas who invites her. He sees what work she's doing. He says, you know, you're pretty good. Join the Impressionists. Come and join our group. And so she does in 1877. And she puts her first painting into the third Impressionist exhibition. Remember, the first one's 74. Second one's 76. Third one, 77. Tissot is in it. Right? At Degas' invitation. It's worth noting here that she had also been rejected from the Salon a couple times in the years leading up to that, which helped sort of say, hey, come over to our side, right? The Impressionists would have seemed like a really great opportunity for Tissot. Because, in fact, the French Academy was almost as bad as the American ones were. She couldn't take classes at the École des Beaux-Arts, the School of Fine Arts in Paris, because women couldn't. So, working alongside the Impressionists, studying art with Degas, exchanging artistic ideas, that sort of community that you've got to have to thrive in art, she thought with the Impressionists and felt difficulty with in the traditional academy. Right? It was all very good. Folks, look at some pictures. Change now. This is weird. It's changing in one of my views, but not in the other. So hang on a second. We're going to try something here and see if I do that. No. So what is going to go on here? PowerPoint slideshow. Why is it not changing? Change. Darn it. I wonder if I've lost my internet again. Connected, open. I'm connected, but I've got an exclamation point. That doesn't usually ring well. All this talk about Tissot and we're objectifying her. We're looking at her instead of her work. I don't like this at all. I don't like this one little bit. Hang on, I'm going to hit pause. Okay then. So, here's Tissot. Beautiful picture. Significantly larger than it seems on the screen. He's about double life size or so. It's a massive picture. And interestingly, this work came out of the Tissot family collection and into the National Gallery. So it's directly from them. And Eddie Tissot is, in fact, her nephew. The signature at the bottom, this is so cute, says, it's not signed Mary Tissot, it's signed Aunt Mary. Right? So it was a gift to the family, to him, from his painter aunt. When we look at this portrait, this is the earliest work we have from her in the National Gallery. We begin to see some of the things we've seen in other sort of proto-impressionists, if you will. This is again 2 years before she shows with the Impressionists. There's that sort of Manet quality to it, sort of broad patchwork of color rather than tighter, more broken up brushwork that we see in Monet to it. There's an interest in sort of the vibrancy of color itself that may have gotten her in some trouble with the art authorities, if you will. But as a portrait, it also reflects where Cassatt was as she developed as an artist. Because as you remember, she had traveled for 5 years as a preteen with her family, moving through all of Europe and going to the museums. And then after settling in Paris and sort of being rub elbows with the Impressionists, she becomes interested in the same art that they're interested in. And one of the things that we haven't really talked about in class is the degree to which artists in the 1860s and 70s have become really enamored, in Paris in particular, Parisian artists, have become particularly enamored with Spanish art, and in particular Spanish Baroque art. They're loving it. And the reason for this is that under Louis Napoleon, there was, because Napoleon's family had conquered Spain at one point, right? But under Louis Napoleon, there opened in Paris a new museum of Spanish art. So it became this sort of brand new thing that people just started sucking up on. And when Cassatt moves there, that it's already a moving tradition, this interest in Spanish art. And Cassatt sort of falls into that. So for this particular picture of her nephew, Eddie, Cassatt turns to Spanish pictures as prototypes for this. And the most famous Spanish painter of the 17th century, who everybody is totally into, especially Manet, but Degas as well, is Velázquez. And we've only got one Velázquez here, it's not the best, but he did these court portraits of members of the King Philip IV of Spain, the Habsburg family. You might remember Las Meninas, the girls in front of where he's standing there next to the painting and all the girls and the dogs and the mirror in the background, right? But these are all extended members of the family. You can see one of the things that Velázquez did. Two of the things that Velázquez did. I'll probably come up with a third as I'm talking. But one of them is that he works really, really well in a limited color range. That's something he does as a trick, an artistic trick with great frequency. It's a sort of limited palette in one color with an accent. So if you look at this picture, the vast majority of it is that red, isn't it? It's like a sweep of red. And then it's really hard to pull off and make it look naturalistic and realistic is to have that artifice of a sort of a monochrome painting. And you can see that Cassatt is sort of picking up on that same idea. I don't know if she's seen this exact work. This was in Vienna, right? So it's not something she's going to be deeply familiar with, right? But the ideas that she saw from looking at Velázquez pictures in Paris, she picked up on. And that's one of them. And I think, I don't have to explain too much here, that the same color that's in his stockings and his sash is sort of moved down from the color of the blue coat, and then it's picked up in the swatches around the feet as well, right? That carpet is all the same color. And then she augments that with a single other color, which is that brownish, sepia, slightly mossy, brownish green, right? But that's it, really, for the color range. And there isn't much in between the two. And then when you see the black, it's the same thing, it's just steely blue, gray. And then the red, and even the whites have that red in them. Right? So that's one thing you get from Velázquez. The other thing, and it's hard to see in this, but you need to just go look at a lot of Velázquez. If you go online, they're massive, right? 5,000 pixel images you find in these. This one was a 5,000 pixel. I should have made the detail. Velázquez's use of open brushwork. He's one of 2 or 3 artists in the 17th century who, in order to make their works seem more vibrant and alive, stop blending the brushstrokes after they hit the canvas. Right? Less it looking more immediate, more instantaneous. And in this particular picture, if you look, for example, at the ruff of the sleeve, particularly the one that's hanging by her waist, this waist, you can see the individual brushstrokes, right, picking up in this area right in here. Or if you look at that bit of red fabric that's coming off, eventually it becomes abstract paint on the surface. and no sort of attempt to blend the forms together to give you that gradated range from highlight to shadow. It's just a stroke here and a stroke there. Right? And there's other artists that are doing the same thing, but Velázquez is really almost as good as it gets when it comes to that effect. And that's exactly what Manet was into. That's where Manet got the idea. And that's where many of the Impressionists picked up the idea of protein brushstrokes. So we read about how Monet's work isn't spontaneous, but gives the illusion of spontaneity. This is certainly true for Velázquez and for, I think, a significant number of the other Impressionists from time to time. Cassatt, the more I'm looking at it, the more I realize how incredibly deliberate she is as well. And that's, again, probably because she's friends with Degas. Right? Degas is incredibly deliberate. Right? Think of his compositions of the ballerinas that we saw. Right? And how Degas said, there's nothing spontaneous about my art. I'm a realist. I'm not an impressionist. He hated the term. Right? He's the one who has the most influence on Cassatt, and her work shows the same sort of deliberation. Right? Even though sometimes we will find these flourishes of paint that suggest something is different. It's not. Right? It's art. Okay. So, Velázquez has a huge influence on her. So let's move on to some other things. Her parents and her sister moved, she has two brothers as well, but her parents and her sister moved to Paris permanently in 1877, the year she starts exhibiting with the Impressionists. And so from that point forward, with her, Cassatt up to 1877 had been living, you might imagine like a student life, right? And obviously has permanent family weekends, right? They're there for good. And she moves in with the family. She remains, by the way, she never marries, never has any kids. Immediately we hear about Caillebotte would be gay. We don't somehow say that about Cassatt, but she was a confirmed bachelorette, if you will. And lives all the way to 1915, right? Lives a significantly long time. And at this point, she's already 45 years old, so she lives deep into her 70s, right? But she's living now at home with her family. And what happens after 1877, when the family moves to town, is that a lot of her works, not all of them, but a significant number of her works become domestic, take on domestic themes, interiors, the life of people living inside. And that's part of the Impressionist agenda, so we can certainly chalk it up to that she's working with the Impressionists, and they are very much interested in documenting in a way, not documenting, but, being inspired by ordinary everyday life. And Cassatt is part of that, but for her, that doesn't mean the same thing it means for Sisley, or Pissarro, or Monet, right? For her, that means an interior life. That doesn't mean walking around the streets or hanging out with the peasants in Pontoise or Louveciennes, right? Or sitting on the quay of the harbor in Le Havre. You can't do that. Hers is this family structure. They're very sort of personal pictures. And many times the people are identifiable in these pictures. Members of her family, for example, this one, her name is Susan, and she's actually the cousin of her housekeeper, Cassatt's family housekeeper, right? And she appears in all sorts of different works. So Cassatt's work begins to morph, if you will, late 70s, to the pictures that we see quite a few of, and we'll see in this class quite a few, of these images of the interior life of a very well-heeled women, often, right? And focuses on women's existence, women's experiences. So I really like this picture. It came out of the Corcoran collection, and she's, you can see, a very wealthy interior, seated with the French windows wide open, chair kicked over so it's partly on the balcony, overlooking one of those Haussmann boulevards with those brand new Haussmannized houses that all kind of look the same, that we like now, but at the time there was some criticism against, right? And look at the degree to which the brushwork changes from place to place. Sometimes it's incredibly sculptural, like on the sleeve that's closest to us, where the modeling and there's a palpable three-dimensional quality. And then there's other places where it becomes incredibly loose and spontaneous appearing, such as the tree outside, or even the hair of the dog, which makes sense because it captures, how dogs are always, even if they're sleeping, have that, jittering move and whatnot, right? And I mean, you know me, I love dogs and pictures. And she does her. This is also something she got out of looking at Baroque portraits. Remember you saw the dog in the last that we had up there, sitting on the chair and staring at us. And that's often a way of helping to expand the characterization of the sitter. Now, with the young girl at the window, even though we know who she is, again, if we think about the Degas pictures of people, not ballerinas, but just portraits, they weren't really portraits per se so much as they were studies in character, studies in mood, studies in psychology, right? And I think for Cassatt, that's exactly what these are as well. We're not meant to think of it as a portrait of Susan, the cousin of the housekeeper, but she's just posing for her to help her develop the theme. I thought this would make a great comparison with the Caillebotte that we saw just last week, because it's a similar theme, isn't it? And yet the psychology of these two is so different. When we talk about what was a woman's experience in late 19th century France in the Third Republic, that's what we call that period after the Franco-Prussian War. And for Caillebotte's figure, and again, these are both the family property, right? So the elevated position in these both communicates the same thing, which is where their status is above the street. But then for Caillebotte, it's ownership in a way. He owns that space. The pose, the empty, the amount of detail in the street that we can actually see. But there's something about it, his commanding view down on that solitary woman, which is all about, in a way, ownership, dominance, silhouetted against those buildings, gives him, towering over it. I think, did I make the joke on Tuesday that it looks like it's the Pope giving an audience or something, about to meet the masses coming to gather at his feet? And for Cassatt, it's not the same in any way. She's not standing, right? We've got the chair, so he's been doing what she's been doing, but that's not what we see. He stood up from there. And while she's got her gloves on to go outside, and maybe they are going to take the dog for a walk at some point, there's something different about it. There's not that sense of confident ownership of the space outside. There's almost a hesitancy. There certainly is an innocence that she's trying to bring to the face of the figure. So these are, I think, for people who want to try to communicate visually or understand how pictures communicate visually, are a really great example about how the details of a very similar theme, can in fact project very, very different psychological states to the viewer, and garner very different psychological reactions from us. Now, as I mentioned, she works incredibly deliberately. In this case, we have a drawing, and you can see that the drawing has been traced because you see the edge, that boxy edge around the outside and how it's frayed on the sides. She's actually taped it to a light box at some point, right? And those are the edges from the light box. You can see how it's just ripped up and torn. But this is Susan at the window with the dog as a study, basically, for this picture. And we're fortunate to have both the painting and the picture. What's odd is that we had the drawing forever, and we just picked up the painting a few years ago when the courtroom closed down, so it's a lucky grab for them. But she drew on both sides of it. Did I get rid of one of them? There, right? She drew it the same way, okay? And you can see the edge, how it's been ripped and torn and edged there as she traced it. Because what she did was she turned it upside down on the light box and traced it over the back, right? So she did the drawing here. That becomes the basis for our picture. She then turns it over, and using the light box is able to trace the figure. Now, why is she doing that? Why does she want to see it in reverse? And the reason for that is she's going to make a print of the same subject matter, an etching. And since etchings are on the plate one way, you want to see how they look when they print, which is in reverse. So she's traced over the back just to figure out how that composition is going to work, because eventually she's going to make an etching of the exact same scene. All of this, and the time that progresses between these, right, 6 years between them, gives you some clue to the degree of Cassatt's deliberation in her approach. That oftentimes the paintings, while they may look like she might have set up an easel inside and painted from the figure her poses for, that's not the way she's working. She's working through drawings first, and then the painting results from the drawing. So all of the spontaneity that we might see in the trees that appear to be blowing outside of the building behind her head, right, off to the center there, or the dog itself. All of these spontaneous seeming elements are really, in many ways, artifice on her part, right? It's reading the illusion of spontaneity, which gives vibrancy to the figure. And again, I think she learned that as much as anything from looking at Spanish Baroque art, Velázquez in particular. Richmond has a nice picture of her sister. This is Lydia, her sister, on a porch somewhere. I'm not quite sure where this is. It looks like a public park, doesn't it? So when we say porch, it's not sort of like your or my porch, but I haven't done as much research into her family's property ownings as I did for Caillebotte to find out whether or not they had a country house with a duck pond, right, and so forth and so on. But that's certainly her sister enjoying some outside. But again, there's a sense that it's, while she's outside, it's a space that's closed off for her. She's not just sort of hanging out on the street, like the woman that Caillebotte's brother is looking at from the balcony, right? She's in a safe space, busy with this domestic activity, crocheting, who knows what, right? A doily, a pair of socks, right? A scarf, whatever. But the family becomes, for her, a major point of inspiration, people who will model for her. And part of that is, again, because she can't do what, Kate, you're doing that Renoir, are you doing the Plan des Arts, right? The Pundit picture? You're doing it, okay. Okay. But the one that we did look at, right, he had the opportunity to go out and sort of spend some time outside painting these places, right? And Cassatt doesn't enjoy that exact same luxury. The other thing to talk about with this picture is the degree to which it owes a debt to Degas. If you look at the way the composition can block it out in your mind, right? Where is the principal subject of the picture? It's crowded into the entire left third of the canvas. And a good 2/3 of it are given over to these lines and angles that direct your attention to the figure. And I couldn't say exactly that same thing about some of those wide dance pictures that were done by Degas, which are also around 1880 or so. So I think when we look at Cassatt's images, when we look at her paintings, it's important to remember that she's having this ongoing dialogue with Degas, and that we should not at all be surprised to actually find some overlaps in approaches and ideas and themes in between. Degas was also a prodigious printmaker, and that's part of the reason I think we see in Cassatt as well, is that they're working on prints together too. This is a work where Degas seems to have suggested some changes to it. And this is relatively new knowledge, came out of a show from, like I said, a couple of years ago at the National Gallery, where they did X-ray examination on this picture, and they found out that originally Cassatt had the line back here, right, the back wall. Originally, this went straight across, right? Just like that. And this angle that is brought into it by the movement of that couch was something that Degas had brought to the composition. And advised her that that would bring the elements together better and would activate the composition in a way that it was flattening out before. So now we're sure of that element of it. But again, it's talking about this facade as facade. It again shows this focus on domesticity, on a woman's experience in the Third Republic, and these interiors where she spent her time. This is her life. And I've never seen this in print, but I think I talked about it briefly when we were downtown. First, I really like this picture. I mean, it's just a fantastic picture, insofar as the bold application of paint that she's picked up not only from studying people like Velázquez, but also from her ongoing contact with the Impressionists. That as a colorist and as someone who applies paint to the surface, she's just spectacular. Really gutsy, taking a lot of chances, right? Bold and open, and just these shots of color, those beautiful reds that make up that tartan flat, right? That when you get close to it, look like something out of 1950s New York. You know, could easily be an abstract expressionist painting with just, it could be a Philip Guston or something like that. And this is true everywhere, that she's just sort of comfortable slashing the canvas with her brush. And again, knowing that while that part may be that spontaneous when she does it, her overall mode of working is one that is incredibly deliberate. And everywhere we look, we see that, right? That the pattern that becomes a viable pattern on this blue furniture. And again, think about Cassatt's family status and the wealth. And that's an expensive set of 4 pieces of furniture, upholstered in satin in the same way. But again, look at this stroke right here. Just look at that, right? There's so much of the paint that's just been pushed off to the side as she runs her brush through it. And she's got a bunch of paint on that brush. And as she drags it in there, a lot of it just like a boat going through water, right? Just spits it off to the sides. It's really fantastic. And diving in even closer, right? You can see that sometimes it's almost as she just scribbled with her paint, which is absolutely terrific. So on one level it's bold in the paint application, another level it's bold in the composition, because you'll notice that the space between the furniture almost has no shadows or anything. Right? There's a light source behind that love seat, I guess, for lack of a better word, that settee that's backed up against the windows here. This guy back here, right? He's backlit, right? As a table. I just lost mine. There. Right? So he's backlit, but at the same time, the shading on it is no different from the chair to the left of it. Right? She's really playing with the shadows that we see there, and there should be some shadow cast, sort of like this, coming out from here, right? There ought to be some sort of shade in there, but there isn't. Right? So she's flattened that entire area out and made it this wedge, looks so, I don't know, maybe like the outline of Africa or something, right? That moss green shape. And we get another one off to the right of the canvas, that she becomes very aware of these sort of abstract patterns of shapes, and then you become more aware of the placement of that furniture being the only thing that really establishes any three-dimensionality, is where they are. But there's something very artificial about it and very flattening. So there's this tension on the surface of the canvas between as a viewer, on one level, you look at it and you see space, the illusion of space, right? She sits tucked into that chair. The other chair is behind it. The other chair is behind that. There's a little, you can see the corner of the room there and all. But On the other hand, you're constantly made aware of the fact that you're looking at a flat surface as well. And so that expanse of that jigsaw puzzle piece of mossy brown-green, it ends up just reasserting the plane that you're looking at rather than the window that you're looking through. Does that make sense? Yeah. And that's something that he's very good at. Degas, we saw, is very good at that as well. His walls would often have a very similar effect in his work. But both of them are getting it from looking at Japanese woodblock prints, which they've become incredibly interested in. Hiroshige did these 100 views of Edo, and I gave you the name of the series here. This is one of the 100 views of the area around Tokyo. But you can see here how the water, as it moves back into the distance, has the sort of same effect that the floor does in the facade. That its sense of moving back into space is only determined by the things that are placed against it. That in itself, it doesn't change from the bottom of the picture to the top, to the horizon line, and sits up flat. Now, I've given it a little bit of change by washing in those blues, right? But really, that's printed with a single block through that section. And this is exactly what Cassatt is doing. We're going to see increasingly the degree to which Japanese art plays a strong role in some of the innovations that the Impressionists are foisting or developing. And part of this is the idea that, kind of beginning with Manet, but really throughout this period, but there's an interest that maybe art needs to be new in this new world. Things have changed so drastically. How do we start this class off by talking about Haussmann? Things have changed so drastically that art maybe shouldn't be the same as it's always been. Maybe we need a new art for a new world, a modern art for a modern world. Because Paris was to them something, the physical fabric of the city was so different in so many ways. Why should art stay so traditional? And so they're looking for ways in which to break that. Depicting the everyday world, depicting the ordinary world around them is one of them. But so too is this idea of incorporating things that violate perspective, right? In Western art, in European and American art, since the time of the early Renaissance, pictures have been constructed based on creating the illusion of three-dimensional space that continues the space of the viewer, right? So that within the frame, you have the illusion that you're looking through a window to a seamless continuation of your space, right? And one of the primary methods by which that took place was the use of linear perspective. The idea that everything recedes at a measured pace to a vanishing point on the horizon, the railroad track effect, right? That all parallel lines converge at a single point. That has been the basis of Western art for 350 years, right? Maybe even a bit longer, 400 years by this point. 1370s, 1410 is when we get that. So Cassatt is violating that because really the perspective doesn't work. If you try to trace out the perspective lines in her works and Degas' work, it's never really in Caillebotte, right? Remember that plate that sat at the bottom of the canvas and it was just up flat and sort of a half moon at the bottom because its perspective bends. Right? They're looking for ways to violate the basic traditions that have defined how art looks for almost 500 years. They're looking for something new because the world is so different. Right? So Japanese art offers that to them. And they're discovering it through various means in the 19th century, and this becomes a huge way of sort of finding a new direction, finding a way out, getting away from the crushing weight tradition of Western tradition. Now, all of that said, like Degas, even though this is potentially a family member, right, a daughter of a friend, we don't know for sure, but like Degas, this is a study in psychology. This is a study in characterization rather than portraiture. She's posing the girl and working the composition to come across a mood, a theme for the picture. It's not intended, it's not from Aunt Mary, right? Unlike her first portrait, which is intended as a portrait, this is intended as a mood study. And I've always thought that this was a mood study of what Cassatt must have felt like. All around, all these impressive things. Let's paint in the sunlight. Let's set up her canvases outside. And she can't. She's stuck inside. And that little girl is just so dang swirly. You know? She's so bored. You know? She's been made to stay inside. She's dressed up to go outside. She can't wait to go outside. And that seems to be a theme that runs through a lot of these Cassatt pictures, is that physically you're stuck inside, but mentally you want to be out. And even the first picture, the girl on the balcony, same thing, right? That play between inside and outside. And the dog seems to play a role in that, I think, you know? The dog is actually, you know, happy to be inside and plays the foil against the girl. You know, curled up there, couldn't be happier, snug as a... my dogs love the armchair, right? It's just like, it's I don't know, it surrounds them with air, you know, and soft. And that dog just, there's nowhere else that dog wants to be. You ever try to get a dog off a chair? You know? We got two. One of them does not listen to me. It's Karen's dog. Does not listen to me. So essentially, come on, Redneck, let's go. You know, she sits on the couch and goes, I'm not going to go until you grab me by the collar and pull me off the couch, right? That's that dog. He doesn't look anything like that, right? He's a hound. But still, he will sit on the couch until he thinks I'm going to kill him, right? And then he'll get off the couch and go to his dad, and then dad's going to leave, and they have a nice little place they sleep, you know, when I'm gone, so he'll tear things apart. There's nowhere else they want to be but on the couch, right? And that's exactly what his role here is in the picture. And again, she got that from studying Burckhardt. Because she's not only, do we know that she loves Velasquez, she loves this other artist named Van Dyck, Anthony Van Dyck, and I should have brought them in, the best dogs in the National Gallery. Right? And all of his people always have these dog foils that they totally understand how the dog works. So let me just do something here. Well, if it doesn't mess everything, it'll mess up the recording. I'll show you some eventually. Right? And there's some really good documentary, or Van Dyck pictures. She was looking at him as well. So what that ends up doing is totally offsetting sort of her. You know? All dressed up with nowhere to go. Right? And that's all based on, I think, this psychology that we contribute to the social norms and the social mores of Third Republic France, which is that she can only go outside when someone says it's okay, when she gets accompanied by somebody else. And that is exactly Cassatt's experience. She can't go outside by herself. She can't take her paint box or her easel and go to a corner somewhere. She has to wait until somebody goes with her. Otherwise, she suffers the fate of that girl on the railway by Manet. Gets bugged by every time Dick and Harry goes by, and they all think she's a whore. It's a sad situation. But all these pictures have that sort of undercurrent, don't they? Here's a woman dressed up, waiting to go out. And Mary Ellison was, I think, a neighbor that posed for quite a few pictures by Cassatt. We'll see her again before the day is up, I think, and we may not get to that today. But again, there's that sense of sort of boredom in being enclosed, all ready to go out. And the mirror playing such a strong element in that theme of reflection, right? We think about mirrors as a metaphor. Think about the word reflection and how we use it poetically. You know, we in the education business are always asking to reflect on things. You write reflection papers, right? You think about your own being. And so the mirror here becomes, I think, part of that. That theme of reflection. But again, the look on her face is, I got a detail. The look on her face is one of, again, boredom, anxiety on a certain level, but not tense anxiety, just waiting for the opportunity to go do the same stuff that everybody else is doing. At least all the guys, all the Y chromosomes. But these are feminist pictures, I think, in many ways. And I think sometimes she'll break the rules. Both her and Morrison will look at them. Being close to Degas, she works some of the same themes that Degas does, such as girls at their toilet. And a toilet was not the same thing that we use the word for today, right? It's a wash bin, a wash basin, right? So there she's got cologne, she's got a wash basin, there are various towels and so forth here, and she's in her undergarment, arranging her hair. Cassatt said that she chose this girl to model for her because she was so homely. She chose it on purpose, that she wanted somebody who looked as if they were from sort of lower working class stock, right? Very ordinary looking. And so wanted to focus on the fact that she's not intended to be beautiful in any way, shape, or form. And catches her, she's doing her hair in a sort of awkward position, right? An uncomfortable and awkward position, with her hands wrapping around the sides of her head, her body bending in a somewhat awkward pose. And I think that awkwardness can be seen if you try to articulate how the figure's left shoulder works underneath the blouse. The hand that's up like this. Just seems to there seems to be almost like this bone is missing out of the figure. And that adds to, I think, that sense of awkwardness that you see. The arms appear almost as if they're of different lengths as well, you know. But again, this is a theme of women at their bath that she shares with Degas. And yet, again, this, like our Caillebotte comparison, you know, it couldn't be more different in the psychology of the picture and the way in which the choices that the artist makes affect how you, the viewer, think about the subject you're looking at. So for Degas, we almost always have a somewhat elevated point of view, looking down on the figure. Sometimes from a distance, where we see the entire figure enclosed inside the frame, as we do here. Catching them in the most awkward and vulnerable positions. For Caillebotte, we read about vulnerability, right, from the back. Right? From the back, we are all women, he said, or she said in that article. But certainly here, from the back with your legs spread, is vulnerable. Is Cassatt's figure vulnerable? All the little choices that she makes, enlarging the figure, increasing the proximity between you, the viewer, and the figure you're looking at. All of these have an impact on our psychology. The simple fact that she's clothed still also plays into that. So she and Degas share themes, and certainly there's a lot of overlap in what they're doing. But there's also some really fascinating things to just sit back and ponder, think about, insofar as their attitude toward the scenes that they're depicting, their attitude toward, in this case, bathers.
this became a theme for Cassatt that she reworked regularly. And I think on a certain level, and we'll see this in a picture eventually, maybe just by the end of the day, that she's imbuing these images with, I don't want to say symbolism, but a dignity that comes from having studied Renaissance and Baroque art traditions. The idea of a girl at her toilet is a theme that was worked by many Renaissance artists, showing the goddess Venus, who is often shown with Cupid, primping herself, making herself more beautiful at her toilet with mirrors and whatnot. And in fact, I have one coming up later in the slideshow. I think on a certain level, one of the ways in which Cassatt gives this girl a certain dignity, despite her humble homeliness, one of the ways she does that is through this layering of ideas, of bringing in Renaissance prototypes, not directly, but in a very subtle way, that set them apart very much from what Chagall was doing. Now, like I said, you see quite a few of these. The prints are fantastic. These are etchings where you use acid to carve the lines, coupled with what we call aquatint, which is where you sprinkle a thin dusting of resin onto the surface of the plate. You heat it up, and then you etch it, and it gives you these flat tones that you see. That can be wiped with different colors of ink, depending on your mood. Right? So here's another of these woman caught doing her hair, coiffure, right, the hairdo, woman doing her hair in an engraved form, with these different colors hand wiped into the plate. You'll notice the degree to which this also serves to flatten out areas that should move back into space but don't, like the wall she's facing that frames the mirror. You'll notice that there's no modulation of shadow there. Right? It's one broad plane of color. The stripes on her couch, the same thing. Her body, no shadows cast. And again, this comes, I think, very directly out of looking at a range of Japanese prints, Japanese woodblocks, where that same idea of broad, flat planes of color, or patterns that don't behave based on the three-dimensional quality of the object, like her dress, the one in the foreground in particular. These ideas are picked up by Cassatt as well. Right? So the pattern in the floor, for example, should be receding back into space, but it sits up flat. The pattern in the chair is the same way. I'm just bringing this in. I like them. Right? I think I saw these for the first time not too long ago when they were out in the Works on Paper show at the National Gallery. It might still be up. And I saw these. I thought, these are just really as good as great little compositions. These are reworking those themes. The textiles that you see in these, that green, red, green, and pink, or pink, white, and green robe that she has appears on figures in a number of these. But what's beautiful is because of this aquatint that picks up the tone, it's that graininess that you see in the sideboard there. That can be wiped with different colors, and you can totally change the look of the print. So this is exactly the same matrix, but wiped with different colored ink, right? And you can see what a different effect one gets from these different elements. So she's really working through these the possibilities that the print has. Now, as you might imagine, since she's so deeply involved in studying the domestic life of women as a theme, that images of motherhood become a major theme in her work. This one's Smithsonian American Museum shows a mother with her child on her lap, or maybe a nanny, it's hard to say, and then a girl who appears to be the child's older sister, kissing her on the cheek. Themes of motherhood became very important for Cassatt, and especially later in her career, around 1890s, 1900s. and beyond. And this one is, I love this picture, but it's a wee bit on the sappy side. And I read somewhere that was somewhat intentional because she's still living in Paris, right? She stays there for the rest of her life. And she sends this one back to Philadelphia to be put into a show, to be juried, to be hung in a show in 1904. And people said that she's catering to American tastes, which are a little bit more homespun, simple emotions and so forth. And it worked. It won a prize, $300, which in 1904 is a lot of money, right? And it was the first time that she'd had any kind of public recognition in Philadelphia. And it was so well recognized and so well received and so well reviewed that they sent it off from there to Chicago to be displayed as well. So it was kind of her breakthrough back home, even though she'd had a 30-year, 40-year career of painting in Europe by this time. Right? But again, what she's trying to do here, I think, is to show us these domestic activities, not only as ordinary everyday life, but also to imbue them with a sense of timeless grandeur, of a certain specialness, that there's something great about being a woman, whether it means doing yourself at the bath where they're never as objectified, in my mind at least, as the gods are, or there's something really noble about motherhood. And in order to bring this point home, what Cassatt has done is to sort of base these images loosely on Renaissance images of the Madonna and Child. That one, without the clothing, just the posture, maybe get rid of the little girl, but one could imagine that this is, in fact, Mary with the infant Jesus. And I brought in two examples from the National Gallery just to get an idea of what I'm talking about, right? These sort of pudgy, fidgety, well, it's not imagine that's a girl, okay? But she's taking the prototype of the most dignified mother of all time, right? And applying it to modern motherhood. I also like this as a slide because it looks like Jesus is pointing at her in the one in the center of the goal, right? Who's that over there? That's Mary Cassatt. That's what's coming next, right? So she's taking modern motherhood and she's making it special by underscoring it with these themes of tradition, of great Western art. And we've seen that throughout her entire career, using the Western tradition for one element or another. I think this will be our last slide. Our last picture by Cassatt, at least. Another of these images of motherhood. You can see the date is quite late, but she's got that great sunflower and the little daughter with her mother. It's interesting how many of them, I haven't gone back and looked at this, whether or not the motherhood pictures are girls always or not. Right? The women, the female tradition running from mother to daughter. But this is really fun because it plays with mirrors twice, doesn't it? And gives you the sense that we're at a toilet that we can't see. And the mother is here having just bathed the daughter and is playing with her. It adds a sense of narrative to the piece. And I think it's the same model, isn't it? Some people suggested that it might have been a neighbor, but the hairdo for the mother, that is, the hairdo is incredibly similar. It appears in quite a few pictures. I think I have 31 different ones, right? Because she's modeling her acquaintances in these things. So we've got that double play of the mirror where we see both the mother and child there, but then we see the face of the child looking directly out at us from the handheld mirror. And that idea of looking into the mirror, and by looking into the mirror, looking at the viewer, is a trick that Cassatt didn't make up. But this is indeed something that she picked up from studying Renaissance art. Again, a National Gallery picture of Titian, Venus at her toilet, right? Venus with the mirror, where Cupid is now holding up the mirror, and she's looking at her reflection in the mirror, but the eye actually looks directly at you, the viewer, right? Cassatt's mother and child is so if we think about what do these things mean, they're modern-day goddesses, right? They're modern-day saints, heroic in what they do. and have all of the status of a Venus or of a Madonna, for that matter. Right? And again, I mean by gentle at the end of this, because he's just so wonderful and tender and just gorgeous, especially a prince, so delicate, where he really does capture intimacy between mother and child in a really fantastic way. Now we have a reading for Tuesday that talks about women's spaces, women and physical space in late 19th century art and society. And so we'll be looking at some cassettes where women get outside. We'll go back and pick up some kaibots to bring into that discussion as well. So please, even though there's no response for that, don't think of it as a slacky day, right? Make sure you read through it because that's important. And I'll be getting into your progress reports this weekend and also be redistributing the last reading, the kaibot reading. I'll be distributing that this weekend as well. If you couldn't tell, I'm catching a cold, so I think it's probably tomorrow morning that we get out because I got to go have some chicken soup tonight and hopefully kick this thing before it takes into the car. So I'll be redistributing kaibot and give you obviously plenty of time to work on that, right? And answering your emails about the progress reports where you, I assume, asked for a time to meet next week to talk about it, right? Okay, I'll see you guys on Tuesday.